It was the day my mother-in-law declared war. I still remember standing at the reception, smiling for photos, believing I was entering a loving family. Then I felt someone touch my arm. I turned around and saw Floryn, my new mother-in-law. Everyone described her as elegant, respected, and devoted to her family. But when she looked at me, there was something cold in her eyes, something that made my stomach tighten. She smiled for the guests. Then she leaned closer and whispered words I would never forget. "Don't get comfortable. My son always comes back to me." I laughed nervously, assuming she was joking. She wasn't. That single sentence became the beginning of 3 years of emotional warfare. At first her attacks were subtle. Small comments. Tiny insults disguised as advice. Whenever I cooked dinner, she criticized it. Whenever I cleaned, she found mistakes. Whenever I succeeded, she found a reason to diminish it. The strange thing was that she never acted this way around Ethan. The moment he entered the room, she transformed into the sweetest mother imaginable. Nobody believed me when I tried to explain. Not even Ethan. "She's just having trouble adjusting," he would say. But I knew better. Floryn didn't want to adjust. She wanted me gone. And she was willing to do anything to make that happen. What I didn't know was that her hatred was hiding something much darker. Something that would eventually destroy her entire world. And when I finally discovered it, I promised myself I would make her regret every lie she ever told. Little did I know, the truth was far worse than I imagined. And it all began with a missing bank statement. Missange money and SPCO, and a week after the wedding, Ethan and I moved into his mother's house. It wasn't part of our original plan. We had dreamed of renting a small apartment downtown, nothing fancy. Just a place where we could build our life together. But after the wedding expenses, money became tight. When Floryn offered us 2 rooms on the second floor of her large house, Ethan thought it was the perfect solution. "It'll only be for a year," he promised. I smiled and agreed. At the time, I thought I could handle anything for 1 year. I had no idea what was coming. The first few weeks seemed normal. Floryn acted polite. She asked about my work. She offered cooking advice. She even helped me unpack. Looking back, I realized she was simply waiting for the right moment. Waiting for an opportunity. And that opportunity came sooner than either of us expected. One Saturday morning, I was drinking coffee in the kitchen when I heard shouting from upstairs. It was Floryn. Her voice echoed through the house. "Where is it?" A loud drawer slammed. "Who touched my things?" Another drawer slammed. Then another. I exchanged a confused look with Ethan. "What happened?" I asked. He shrugged. "No idea." A few moments later, Floryn stormed into the kitchen. Her face was red, her breathing was heavy. She looked furious. "Someone stole from me." The room fell silent. Ethan stood immediately. "What?" "My emergency cash." She pointed toward the ceiling. "It was hidden in my bedroom." "How much?" Ethan asked. $5,000. I nearly dropped my coffee cup. $5,000. That wasn't a small amount. Floryn crossed her arms. "I was there 3 days ago." Nobody spoke. Then something strange happened. Very slowly, Floryn turned her head and looked directly at me. Not Ethan, not the housekeeper, not anyone else. Me. The look lasted only a second. But I felt it, a silent accusation. A chill ran through my body. "Maybe you misplaced it," Ethan suggested. Floryn laughed bitterly. "I know exactly where I kept it." She never directly accused me, not then. But from that day forward, everything changed. Suddenly, every conversation felt different. Every glance felt suspicious. Whenever I entered a room, Floryn stopped talking. Whenever I approached, she hid paperwork. Whenever guests visited, she mentioned the missing money. Again and again. And again. At first, I tried to ignore it. Then I started noticing something else. Her stories kept changing. One day she said the money was inside a jewelry box. The next day she claimed it was hidden inside a closet. Then she told someone it was inside a locked safe. The details never matched. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't prove it. 2 weeks later, things became worse. Much worse. I came home from work one afternoon and found 2 police officers standing in the living room. My heart nearly stopped. Floryn sat on the couch pretending to cry. Ethan looked pale. The officers turned toward me. "Are you Emma?" "Yes." One officer stepped forward. "We received a report regarding stolen property." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Floryn lowered her eyes dramatically. I looked at Ethan. He looked confused. I looked back at the officers. "Are you saying someone thinks I stole money?" The officer remained professional. "We're simply gathering information." My stomach dropped. This wasn't an accident anymore. Someone wanted me investigated. And there was only one person in that house who benefited from that. Floryn. The officers asked a few questions. Where had I been? Did I know about the missing cash? Had I entered Floryn's room recently? I answered honestly.
No, no, and no.
After 20 minutes, they left. No charges. No evidence. Nothing. But the damage was done. The seed of suspicion had been planted. That evening Ethan sat beside me in our room. "I know you didn't take it." I appreciated his support. But something in his voice bothered me. Something uncertain, something hesitant. The tiniest crack of doubt, and that terrified me. Because if Floryn could make Ethan question me, even for a second, then her plan was working. Over the next month, the situation became unbearable. Family members started acting strangely. Friends stopped calling. People whispered when I entered gatherings. One afternoon, Ethan's cousin accidentally revealed why. She thought I wasn't listening. "I heard Floryn has proof." Proof? My entire body froze. What proof? I had stolen nothing. The next day, I decided to confront Floryn. I found her gardening in the backyard. She was trimming roses, calm, relaxed, almost cheerful, as if she hadn't spent weeks destroying my reputation. I walked directly toward her. "We need to talk." She didn't look up. "I have nothing to say. You know I didn't steal your money." And now she looked at me. A small smile appeared, not a happy smile. A dangerous one. "Do I?" The words hit me like a slap. My hands clenched. "You've been telling people I stole from you." "I never said your name." "You didn't have to." She stood slowly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she leaned closer. Very close. Close enough that nobody else could hear. "You don't belong in this family." The words sent chills through me. I stared at her. "You've been trying to get rid of me since the wedding." Her smile widened. "And yet you're still here." Then she walked away, leaving me standing alone beside the rose bushes. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every conversation, every accusation, every inconsistency, every strange detail. Something wasn't right. Something bigger was happening. Because deep down, I didn't believe Floryn's money had ever been stolen. I believed she knew exactly where it was, and if I was right, then this wasn't about missing money. It was about setting a trap. A trap designed specifically for me. Around midnight, I got out of bed. I walked quietly downstairs. The house was dark, silent. Everyone appeared asleep. Then I noticed something. A light, faint and yellow, coming from under Floryn's bedroom door. My heart started racing. Why was she awake? Curiosity pulled me closer. I stepped carefully across the hallway. The floor creaked beneath my foot. I froze. No sound came from inside. Slowly, I moved closer. Then I heard voices, not one voice. Two. Floryn was talking to someone. At midnight. Inside her bedroom. I leaned slightly toward the door, trying to hear, trying to understand. And then I heard a sentence that changed everything. "She has no idea what's coming next." My blood ran cold. Because Floryn wasn't talking about missing money. She was talking about me. And whatever she had planned next was far worse than I imagined. FLOAM from me Fafartef. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had heard outside Floryn's bedroom. "She has no idea what's coming next." The words echoed in my mind like a warning. Who had she been talking to? And what exactly was coming next? I wanted to tell Ethan. I wanted to explain everything. But I knew how it would sound. I had no proof, no recording, no evidence. Only a sentence overheard through a closed door, so I stayed quiet. For now, I decided to watch, to listen, to pay attention. And that's when things became even stranger. Over the following week, Floryn acted unusually cheerful. The woman who had spent months criticizing me suddenly became polite, almost friendly. She smiled at breakfast, asked about my day, even complimented my cooking. The sudden change made me nervous. Because people like Floryn don't change overnight. Not without a reason. Not after everything she had done. Something was coming. I could feel it. And unfortunately, I was right. 3 days later, Ethan and I attended a family barbecue at his aunt's house. Nearly 20 relatives were there. Everyone seemed happy. Children ran through the backyard. Adults laughed around picnic tables. For a few hours, things felt normal. Then disaster struck. Around sunset, Floryn suddenly stood up. Her face looked pale. "Has anyone seen my diamond bracelet?" The conversation stopped. People looked around. "What bracelet?" someone asked. "The one Ethan gave me years ago." She touched her wrist. "It was here earlier." Everyone began searching. Under tables, near chairs, inside the house. No one found it. Then Floryn slowly looked around the crowd. Finally, her eyes landed on me. The same look, the same accusation, the same silent attack. My stomach tightened. Not again. Please, not again. 1 hour later, everyone gave up searching. The bracelet seemed gone. As guests prepared to leave, Floryn made another announcement. "Nobody leave yet." The backyard fell silent. My heart started racing. "What now?" Ethan asked. Floryn took a deep breath. "I think we should check everyone's belongings." The crowd gasped. I stared at her. Surely she wasn't serious. But she was. One by one, people voluntarily opened purses and bags. Most were offended. Some were angry. But they cooperated. Then it was my turn. I felt dozens of eyes watching me. I handed over my purse. My hands trembled. Not because I was guilty, because I knew exactly what Floryn wanted people to think. Her sister opened my purse. She searched inside: lipstick, wallet, keys, phone. Then suddenly she froze. The color drained from her face. The backyard became silent. Very slowly she pulled something out. A diamond bracelet. Floryn's bracelet. My world stopped. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't even speak. The bracelet glittered under the evening lights. Everyone stared at me. Nobody said a word. Then the whispers started. "Oh my God! Are you serious?" I knew something wasn't right. The words felt like knives. I looked at the bracelet, then at my purse, then back at the bracelet. This was impossible. Absolutely impossible. I had never seen that bracelet before. Not once. Not ever. Floryn covered her mouth dramatically. Tears appeared instantly. "I can't believe this." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell everyone the truth, but shock had stolen my voice. Finally, Ethan stepped forward. "There has to be an explanation." Floryn shook her head sadly. What explanation could there possibly be? I stared at her, and in that moment, I knew she planted it. Somehow, somewhere, she had put the bracelet inside my purse. But proving it would be nearly impossible. The damage was done. The family had seen the bracelet, and once people believe a lie, the truth often arrives too late. The drive home was silent, painfully silent. Ethan kept both hands on the steering wheel. His jaw remained tight. I stared out the window, fighting back tears. Finally he spoke. "I know you didn't do it." I looked at him. "Do you?" He hesitated. That hesitation hurt more than any accusation. Because for the first time since we married, doubt had entered his mind. Only for a second, but it was there, and Floryn had won exactly what she wanted. A crack in our marriage. That night, I cried myself to sleep, not because of the bracelet, not because of the embarrassment, but because I realized something terrifying. Floryn wasn't just trying to make people dislike me. She was building a case against me. One accusation at a time. One lie at a time. One piece of fake evidence at a time. And if I didn't stop her, she would eventually destroy everything. The next morning, I woke up with a different mindset. I was done being the victim. Done defending myself. Done hoping things would improve. From that day forward, I would investigate, I would find proof. And I would expose her. No matter how long it took. The opportunity arrived sooner than expected. That afternoon, while cleaning the guest room, I discovered something unusual. A receipt, folded tightly beneath a cabinet. At first it seemed ordinary. Then I noticed the date. It was from the jewelry store where Floryn claimed her bracelet had been cleaned the week before. But according to the receipt, the bracelet hadn't been cleaned. It had been duplicated. My heart nearly stopped. I read the receipt again, then a third time. The words never changed. Duplicate diamond bracelet. Custom order completed. Suddenly, everything made sense. The missing money, the bracelet, the accusations, the whispers, the fake evidence. Floryn hadn't simply planned this, she had prepared it. Carefully, patiently, for months. I stared at the receipt in disbelief. Then I noticed something else written near the bottom. A name. The person who picked up the order. When I saw it, my blood ran cold. Because it wasn't Floryn's name. It belonged to someone else. Someone much closer to me than I ever imagined. Someone living under the same roof. Someone I trusted. And if that name was correct, then Floryn wasn't acting alone. Tish asiride envistigai iom. I sat alone in my car staring at the receipt. My hands were shaking. My heart felt like it was trying to break through my chest. For nearly 10 minutes, I couldn't move. I simply kept reading the same line over and over. Duplicate diamond bracelet. Custom order completed. The bracelet found inside my purse wasn't the original. It was a copy. A carefully planned piece of evidence. A trap. And someone had helped Floryn create it. The name printed at the bottom of the receipt belonged to Sophia, Ethan's younger sister. The one person in the family who had always been kind to me. Or so I thought. I couldn't believe it. Sophia was the only family member who still invited me to lunch. The only one who checked on me after the bracelet incident. The only one who seemed different from Floryn. Yet there it was. Her name printed clearly. No mistake, no misunderstanding. I wanted to confront her immediately. But something stopped me. If Sophia was involved, I needed evidence before making accusations. Otherwise Floryn would twist everything against me again. So I made a decision. For the first time since entering that family, I stopped reacting and started investigating. Over the next few days, I became someone different. I watched, I listened, I paid attention. Instead of arguing with Floryn, I smiled. Instead of defending myself, I remained calm. And that seemed to confuse her. Because bullies expect resistance. When they don't get it, they become careless. And Floryn was about to become very careless. 3 nights later, I noticed something strange. Around 11 o'clock, Sophia quietly left the house. She rarely went out that late, especially on weekdays. Curious, I watched from my bedroom window. A black SUV pulled into the driveway. Sophia climbed inside, then the vehicle disappeared into the darkness. My instincts told me to follow. 20 minutes later, I was sitting inside my own car several blocks away, following the SUV from a distance. My pulse raced. Part of me felt ridiculous, like I was living inside a crime movie. But another part of me knew this wasn't paranoia. Too many things had happened. Too many lies. Too many coincidences. Eventually the SUV stopped outside a small office building. The place looked abandoned. No signs, no business name, nothing. The driver remained inside. Sophia entered the building. Then someone else stepped out of the shadows. A woman. Even from a distance I recognized her immediately. Floryn. My stomach dropped. What were they doing here? At midnight. In a nearly empty office building. I parked farther down the street and waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then 40. Finally, the front door opened. Sophia emerged carrying a thick folder. Floryn followed behind her. Both women looked nervous. As if they were hiding something. As if they didn't want anyone to see them. I quickly raised my phone and took several photographs. Not much. But it was something. The first real evidence I had collected. And I was just getting started. The next morning, I visited the county records office during my lunch break. I wasn't entirely sure what I was looking for, only that something felt wrong. The office building from the night before bothered me. Why meet there? Why not at home? Why all the secrecy? After 2 hours of searching public records, I finally found the address. And when I saw who owned the property, I nearly fell out of my chair. The building belonged to a company owned by Floryn. A company nobody in the family knew existed, not even Ethan. That discovery changed everything, because according to public records, the company had been active for nearly 8 years. 8 years. Yet Ethan had never mentioned it. Why would Floryn hide an entire business from her own son? What was she doing? And where was the money going? Questions kept multiplying. Answers remained scarce. But for the first time I felt close. Closer than ever. That evening I decided to take a risk. I approached Sophia directly, not with accusations, with curiosity. We met at a coffee shop. She seemed relaxed at first, until I casually mentioned the office building. The reaction was immediate. Her smile disappeared. Her eyes widened, only for a second. But I noticed. Office building, she asked. Yeah, I stirred my coffee. The one downtown. She looked away. A tiny movement, yet it told me everything. She was hiding something. What about it? She asked. I shrugged. Nothing. I just drove past it recently. Silence. Then she changed the subject. Too quickly. Too obviously. And from that moment I knew. Sophia wasn't innocent. Whether she was helping willingly or being manipulated by Floryn, I didn't know. But she knew something. Something important. 2 weeks later, my investigation finally produced a breakthrough. And it happened completely by accident. Floryn hosted one of her famous family dinners. The kind where everyone pretended to be happy while secretly judging one another. I spent most of the evening avoiding conversations. Then midway through dessert, Floryn suddenly received a phone call. She excused herself and left the dining room. Minutes later, Sophia followed her. Neither woman returned. Curious, I quietly stepped into the hallway. The voices came from Floryn's office. The door wasn't fully closed, just slightly open enough for sound to escape. I moved closer carefully, slowly. Then I heard Sophia speaking. We can't keep doing this. My heart skipped. Floryn answered immediately. We're too close now. Sophia sounded nervous. What if Ethan finds out? A long silence followed. Then Floryn said something that changed everything. Something that made my entire body go cold. Once the divorce happens, none of it will matter. Divorce. The word echoed inside my head. Divorce. She wasn't simply trying to embarrass me. She wasn't trying to make family members dislike me. She was actively trying to destroy my marriage. And she believed success was close. Very close. Then came the sentence that shattered everything I thought I knew. If Emma leaves, Floryn whispered, Ethan gets the inheritance. I froze. Inheritance? What inheritance? Nobody had ever mentioned an inheritance. Not once. Not ever. And why would Ethan only receive it if I left? Nothing made sense. But one thing was suddenly clear. This wasn't about family conflict. This wasn't about jealousy. This wasn't about control. This was about money. A lot of money. And somehow, I was standing in the way. As I backed away from the office door, my heart pounded so loudly I thought they might hear it. Because at that moment, I realized something terrifying. Floryn wasn't acting emotionally. She was acting strategically. Every accusation, every lie, every piece of fake evidence, every attempt to destroy my reputation, it had all been part of a much larger plan. A plan connected to a secret inheritance. A plan worth millions. And I had just become the biggest threat to it. The problem was, I still had no idea who had left that inheritance, or why my marriage was standing in its way. But I was about to find out. and the truth would be more shocking than anything I imagined. In documents that night, I barely slept. The conversation I overheard kept replaying in my mind. Once the divorce happens, none of it will matter. If Emma leaves, Ethan gets the inheritance. The words felt unreal. For months I had believed Floryn's attacks were personal. Jealousy, control, possessiveness. But now I knew something bigger was happening. Money was involved, a secret inheritance, and somehow my marriage was preventing someone from receiving it. The question was simple. Why? The answer, unfortunately, was anything but simple. The following morning, Ethan left early for work. Floryn attended a charity luncheon. Sophia went shopping with friends. For the first time in weeks, the house was completely empty. I stood in the kitchen staring at the clock. My heart was racing, because I had already made my decision. Today I was going to search Floryn's office. Not because I wanted to invade her privacy, because I had no choice. She had spent months destroying my reputation, framing me, manipulating family members, trying to destroy my marriage. If answers existed inside that office, I was gonna find them. No matter what. The room was locked. That wasn't surprising. Floryn protected that office like it contained state secrets. Fortunately, years earlier Ethan had shown me where the spare house keys were stored, and among them was a small brass key, one I had never used before. My hands shook as I inserted it into the lock. Click, the door opened. I froze. Listening, nothing. The house remained silent. Slowly, I stepped inside. The office smelled like old books and expensive perfume. Everything appeared perfectly organized. Too organized. The kind of organization people create when they're hiding something. I started with the desk. Insurance forms, household bills, nothing unusual. Then I searched the filing cabinets, business documents, property records, bank statements. Again nothing. Nearly 40 minutes passed. Frustration began replacing hope. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the evidence wasn't here. Maybe. Then I noticed something strange. One shelf inside a large bookcase looked different. The dust patterns didn't match the others. Someone had moved it recently. My pulse quickened. I grabbed the edge of the shelf and pushed. Nothing. Then I pulled. The shelf shifted. A hidden compartment opened behind it. I stared in disbelief. Inside sat a black metal lockbox. For several seconds I simply stood there, my heart pounding, my mind screaming. This was it. This had to be it. The lockbox wasn't locked, almost as if someone expected nobody would ever find it. I lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of documents, folders, letters, property deeds, bank records, and one large envelope marked Kiana Fiantel. The moment I opened it, everything changed. Inside was a copy of a will. Not Floryn's will, someone else's, a man named Charles Whitmore. I had never heard the name before, but apparently Ethan had, because according to the document, Charles Whitmore had left nearly $12 million to Ethan. 12 million, I blinked. Then read the page again. The number remained the same. $12 million. My hands began trembling. Why had Ethan never mentioned this? Why had nobody mentioned it? Then I turned the page, and found the answer. A condition. One specific condition. A sentence that immediately explained everything. The inheritance would only be released if Ethan remained legally connected to the Whitmore family trust. And according to an amendment added years later, any spouse entering the marriage would become eligible for partial trust protection and financial rights. I stared at the document. Then suddenly understood. Floryn wasn't trying to protect Ethan from me. She was trying to protect the inheritance from me. In her mind, I wasn't family. I was a threat. A threat to money she believed belonged solely to her son. Everything started making sense. But then I found something even worse. Something far darker. Beneath the will sat another folder. This one labeled private transfers. Inside were bank statements. Hundreds of pages. At first they looked ordinary. Then I noticed dates, amounts, transfers. The same company I had discovered downtown appeared repeatedly. Millions of dollars had moved through it, not thousands, millions. And many of the transfers originated from trust accounts connected to Ethan's inheritance. I felt sick. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This looked like theft, large-scale theft, the kind that could send people to prison. The more pages I read, the worse it became. For years, money had quietly disappeared. Small amounts at first, then larger amounts, then enormous amounts, always through companies controlled by Floryn, always hidden behind complicated paperwork. My hands started shaking harder. Because if these records were genuine, Floryn hadn't merely been protecting Ethan's inheritance, she had been stealing from it for years. I quickly photographed everything, every page, every account number, every transfer, every signature, the entire box. When I finally finished, more than 200 photos filled my phone. Evidence, real evidence. The kind evidence nobody could explain away. The kind evidence capable of destroying lives. And that frightened me. Because people willing to steal millions rarely surrender quietly. Just as I prepared to leave, I noticed one final envelope. Unlike the others, it contained no financial documents, only photographs. Old photographs. I opened it. Immediately my stomach dropped. The first picture showed a young Floryn standing beside Charles Whitmore, the man who created the trust. The second picture showed them embracing. The third picture showed them holding hands. I frowned, confused. Then I turned over the final photograph. A handwritten note appeared on the back. 3 simple words. Words that changed everything. My beloved Floryn. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. The room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. Because suddenly a horrifying possibility entered my mind. What if Charles Whitmore wasn't simply a family friend? What if he was more? Much more. I grabbed additional letters from the envelope. And as I began reading them, the truth slowly emerged. A secret relationship. A hidden affair. Years of lies. Years of deception. Years of secrets buried beneath the surface. And if what I was reading was true, then Ethan's inheritance wasn't the biggest secret in this family. Not even close. The biggest secret was Ethan himself. Because the letters suggested something impossible. Something that would destroy everything Floryn had built. Something that would explain why she was willing to do absolutely anything to silence me. Including framing me. Including destroying my marriage. Including ruining my life. As I read the final page, my blood ran cold. Because according to the letters, there was a very real possibility that Ethan's father wasn't Ethan's father at all. And if that secret became public, the entire family would explode. Floryn'S darkest secret. I sat alone in my car for nearly an hour. The letters lay scattered across the passenger seat. My hands trembled as I stared through the windshield. I couldn't believe what I had just discovered. The evidence felt impossible. Like something from a movie. A hidden affair. Secret financial transfers. A $12 million inheritance. And now a shocking question hanging over everything. Who was Ethan's real father? The more I thought about it, the more terrified I became. Because if I was right, Floryn hadn't spent years protecting her family. She had spent years protecting herself. And people protecting secrets that big can become dangerous. Very dangerous. That evening, I looked at Ethan differently. Not because he had done anything wrong. Because he had no idea. No idea that his entire life might be built on a lie. No idea that his mother had hidden decades of secrets. No idea that millions of dollars were connected to those secrets. As he sat on the couch watching television, I felt my heart breaking. He looked happy. Normal. Completely unaware that everything around him was about to collapse. I wanted to tell him immediately. I wanted to show him the photographs. The letters, the financial records, the hidden documents. But something stopped me. I needed proof, real proof, not theories, not assumptions, facts. Because once I revealed this information, there would be no going back. The breakthrough arrived 2 days later, and it came from the last person I expected. Grandpa Henry, Ethan's 82-year-old grandfather. The quiet family elder nobody paid much attention to anymore. One afternoon, he unexpectedly called me. "Can you come visit me?" His voice sounded serious, almost nervous. "Of course," I replied. When I arrived at his house, he was sitting alone on the porch. A thick photo album rested on his lap. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then he sighed heavily. "I know you've been asking questions." And my heart skipped. I remained silent. He looked toward the horizon. The truth has been buried long enough. A chill ran through my body. Because suddenly I knew. Grandpa Henry knew everything. Or at least part of it. For nearly 3 hours, he told me a story nobody else had ever heard. Years ago, before Ethan was born, Floryn had been involved with a wealthy businessman named Charles Whitmore. The same Charles Whitmore, whose name appeared on the inheritance documents. The same Charles Whitmore, whose letters I found hidden in the lockbox. According to Grandpa Henry, their relationship lasted several years. Long enough to become serious. Long enough to become dangerous. Then something happened. Floryn became pregnant. The timing created a scandal, because she was already married. Officially, Ethan's father was Richard. The man listed on Ethan's birth certificate. The man who raised him. The man everyone believed was his biological father. But privately, whispers spread through the family. Whispers that never disappeared. Whispers suggesting Charles Whitmore might be the real father. My stomach tightened. Everything was beginning to fit together. Every secret, every lie, every hidden document. Then Grandpa Henry revealed something even worse. Years later, Charles attempted to acknowledge Ethan privately. Not publicly, not legally, but privately. He created trust funds, inheritance accounts, educational investments. Assets intended for Ethan's future. According to Grandpa Henry, Charles never stopped caring about him. Not once, not even after the relationship ended. And Floryn knew it. She knew exactly where the money came from. She knew exactly why it existed. And she knew exactly how much it was worth, millions, millions of dollars, for decades, untouched. Waiting, growing, accumulating, until it became a fortune. And somewhere along the way, greed took control. She wasn't always like this, Grandpa Henry said quietly, his eyes filled with sadness. Your mother-in-law used to be different. I nodded, but inside, I wasn't sure I believed him anymore. The woman who framed me for theft. The woman who tried to destroy my marriage. The woman who manipulated her own family. That woman seemed capable of almost anything. Then Grandpa Henry handed me a sealed envelope. I've kept this for years. I looked down. The envelope appeared old, very old. The paper had yellowed with age. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter. A handwritten letter from Charles Whitmore, addressed directly to Ethan. My breath caught. Not Floryn, not Richard, Ethan. I began reading. The letter was emotional, heartbreaking. Charles wrote about mistakes, regrets, lost opportunities. He spoke about watching Ethan grow from a distance, about wishing circumstances had been different, about hoping one day Ethan would learn the truth. Tears filled my eyes. Because regardless of biology, one thing was obvious. Charles loved Ethan, deeply, genuinely, and he had spent years unable to say it openly. Then I reached the final paragraph, and everything changed. Again. The final paragraph revealed why Floryn had become desperate. Why she framed me. Why she pushed for divorce. Why she wanted me gone. Charles had added one final condition to his estate. One final condition nobody except Floryn knew about. If evidence of fraud or misuse of trust funds was ever discovered, the entire inheritance would be frozen, immediately, permanently, every dollar. Gone. My blood ran cold, because suddenly I understood. Floryn wasn't trying to protect the inheritance, she was trying to protect herself. She had been stealing from the trust for years. And my investigation threatened to expose everything, including her. That night, I sat in my car outside the family house. The evidence filled a box beside me. Photographs, letters, financial records, account statements, property documents. Enough evidence to destroy Floryn forever. Enough evidence to send her to prison. Enough evidence to expose every lie she had told. The question was no longer whether she was guilty. The question was what I should do next. Then my phone vibrated. A text message appeared. Unknown number. No name, no explanation, only one sentence. My heart stopped the moment I read it. Stop digging, or Ethan gets hurt next. I stared at the screen, frozen, unable to breathe. Because for the first time since this nightmare began, this wasn't about money anymore. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. This was a threat. A direct threat. Against my husband. And suddenly I realized something terrifying. Floryn knew I was investigating. She knew I had discovered something. And she was willing to go much further than I ever imagined. Much further, because the war between us was no longer hidden. It had officially begun. And one of us was about to lose everything. The revenge plan. I stared at the text message for nearly a minute. My hands were shaking. My heart felt like it had stopped. Stop digging or Ethan gets hurt next. The words seemed burned into the screen. This wasn't a warning. It wasn't intimidation. It was a threat. A real threat. Against my husband. Against the man I loved. And in that moment, something inside me changed. For months, I had been afraid. Afraid of Floryn. Afraid of her lies. Afraid of her manipulation. Afraid of losing my marriage. But fear disappeared the second Ethan became a target. Now I was angry. Very angry. And angry people stop running. They start fighting. That night, I finally told Ethan everything. Everything. The fake bracelet. The hidden company. The inheritance documents. The financial transfers. The letters from Charles Whitmore. The threat. Every single detail. For over 2 hours, we sat in silence as I showed him photographs and documents. At first, Ethan refused to believe it. Then he became confused. Then shocked. Then devastated. By the time he finished reading Charles Whitmore's letter, tears filled his eyes. I don't understand, he whispered. Neither did I, not completely. But one thing was obvious. Floryn had lied to him for years, maybe his entire life. And the realization was breaking him apart. Why would she do this? He asked. I looked at the evidence spread across the table. Because she's protecting herself? Ethan lowered his head. The pain in his eyes nearly broke my heart. Because nobody wants to believe their own mother is capable of betrayal. Especially betrayal on this scale. The following morning, Ethan did something I never expected. He confronted Sophia, directly, immediately, no warning, no preparation, no excuses. He drove to her apartment and demanded answers. At first she denied everything. Then Ethan showed her the receipt, the photographs, the company records. The lies started falling apart. Within 20 minutes, Sophia was crying. Within 30 minutes, she confessed. Not everything. But enough. Enough to confirm my suspicions. Enough to expose Floryn. Enough to change everything. According to Sophia, Floryn had manipulated her for years. She convinced Sophia that I was after Ethan's money, that I planned to take half the inheritance, that I would eventually leave him, that I couldn't be trusted. Slowly, carefully, Floryn poisoned her daughter's mind. And eventually Sophia helped create the duplicate bracelet. Not because she hated me, because she believed she was protecting her brother. The truth crushed her. She realized she had helped destroy an innocent person's reputation, mine. And for the first time, she chose my side. 3 days later, we had everything we needed. Every document, every bank transfer, every witness statement, every photograph, every piece of evidence, enough to expose Floryn publicly. The question was how. Then Ethan came up with the perfect idea. A family gathering, one final gathering, everyone would attend, every relative, every friend, every person Floryn had manipulated, everyone. And for once, the truth would speak for itself. Saturday arrived. Floryn organized the event herself. Ironically, she believed it was a celebration. A family dinner honoring Grandpa Henry's birthday. More than 40 people attended. The house buzzed with conversation. Laughter filled every room. Children ran through the backyard. Nobody knew what was coming, except me, except Ethan, except Sophia, and the attorney waiting nearby. Dinner ended around 7 o'clock. Dessert followed. Then Ethan stood up. The room slowly grew quiet. People smiled, assuming he was about to make a toast. In a way he was, just not the kind anyone expected. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Heads nodded, smiles spread. Then Ethan continued. And I want to talk about truth. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Floryn looked confused. Sophia lowered her eyes. I remained silent. Ethan picked up a folder, the same folder containing years of hidden evidence. And then he began. He spoke about the missing money, the bracelet, the lies, the manipulation, the secret company, the inheritance. Every word hit the room like thunder. One by one, shocked expressions appeared around the table. People stopped eating, stopped talking, stopped breathing. Floryn's face turned pale. Then came the financial records, projected onto a large television screen. Transfer after transfer, document after document, year after year, millions of dollars. Not anymore. The evidence was overwhelming. Then Sophia stood. Tears streamed down her face, and she confessed. Everything. The bracelet, the setup, the manipulation, the lies Floryn had told. The room exploded with disbelief. Several relatives began arguing. Others sat frozen. Grandpa Henry simply closed his eyes, as if a burden he carried for decades had finally been lifted. Then Ethan revealed the final piece. Charles Whitmore's letter. The room became silent, painfully silent. Every person listened. Every word mattered. By the time Ethan reached the final paragraph, many people were crying. Even relatives who barely knew Charles. Because the letter revealed something simple. A man who loved a son he couldn't publicly claim. A man who spent decades protecting that son from afar. A man whose generosity had been exploited. And the person responsible sat at the head of the table. Floryn. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then Ethan turned toward his mother. The woman who had controlled his life for years. The woman he once trusted completely. His voice shook. Not from fear. From heartbreak. Was any of it true? Floryn remained silent. Mum, he said. Please. Tears filled her eyes. But nobody rushed to comfort her. Nobody defended her. Nobody interrupted. For the first time in years, she stood alone and eventually, she broke. Everything came pouring out. The affair. The lies. The theft. The manipulation. The fear. The greed. The desperation. Years of deception collapsed in front of everyone. And when she finished speaking, nobody recognized the woman sitting there. Not anymore. The legal consequences came quickly. Much faster than Floryn expected. The trust launched an investigation. Bank accounts were frozen. Properties were reviewed. Financial records were audited. Criminal attorneys became involved. The empire she spent years building began crumbling around her. Piece by piece, day by day, lie by lie, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. A month later, Ethan and I moved into our own home, far away from the chaos, far away from the lies, far away from the manipulation. For the first time since our wedding, we felt free, actually free. One evening, we sat together on our new porch watching the sunset. The air was calm. The world felt peaceful again. Ethan squeezed my hand. You saved me. I shook my head. No. I smiled softly. The truth did. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, I thought about everything that had happened. The accusations, the betrayal, the investigation, the secrets, the revenge, the justice. And one lesson became perfectly clear. Sometimes the people who work hardest to bury the truth end up buried beneath it themselves. Female Jestee. 6 months after the family gathering, my life looked completely different. The storm had finally passed. For the first time in years, I woke up without anxiety, without fear, without wondering what lie Floryn would spread next. The silence felt strange at first. Then it felt wonderful. Our new home wasn't large, it wasn't luxurious, but it was ours. No manipulation, no hidden agendas, no family politics, just peace. The kind of peace I had spent years fighting to find. But while Ethan and I were rebuilding our lives, Floryn's world was falling apart. And the consequences had only just begun. The trust investigation uncovered far more than anyone expected. Much more. What initially appeared to be a few suspicious transactions turned into a massive financial scandal. Investigators reviewed years of records, then more years, then even more. The deeper they looked, the worse things became. Millions of dollars had disappeared. Not accidentally, not because of bookkeeping mistakes, systematically, deliberately. For nearly a decade, every discovery exposed another lie. Every lie revealed another secret. The empire Floryn built through deception collapsed piece by piece. Properties were seized. Accounts were frozen. Businesses were shut down. And eventually, formal charges were filed. The woman who once controlled everyone suddenly controlled nothing. One afternoon, Ethan received a letter. A real letter, not an email, not a text message, a handwritten letter. The return address immediately caught our attention. It came from Floryn. Neither of us spoke. The envelope sat on our kitchen table for nearly an hour. Finally, Ethan opened it. The letter was surprisingly short, only 3 pages, but every sentence carried weight. For the first time, Floryn wasn't making excuses. She wasn't blaming anyone. She wasn't manipulating facts. She wasn't pretending to be the victim. Instead, she admitted something unexpected: fear. She admitted she spent years terrified. Terrified that her secrets would be exposed. Terrified that her children would abandon her. Terrified that she would lose everything. And over time, fear transformed into greed. Greed transformed into lies. And lies transformed into destruction. By the end of the letter, tears filled Ethan's eyes, not because he forgave her. Because he finally understood her. Understanding and forgiveness aren't always the same thing. Sometimes people deserve compassion. But they still must face consequences. A few weeks later, Ethan visited her. Alone. I stayed home. It was something he needed to do for himself. When he returned that evening, he looked exhausted. We sat on the porch together. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. She looks different. I nodded. What do you mean? He stared into the distance. Smaller. The answer stayed with me. Because power had always been Floryn's greatest weapon. She controlled people, conversations, situations, entire family relationships. Now all of that was gone, and without power, she was simply a woman facing the consequences of her choices. Nothing more. Nothing less. Months passed. The legal battles continued. The trust recovered a large portion of the missing assets. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to preserve Charles Whitmore's legacy. Enough to honor the purpose he originally intended. One morning, Ethan received another surprise. The trust board had completed its final review. The inheritance would remain intact. The funds would be released according to Charles's wishes. Not because of revenge. Not because of victory. Because the truth had finally been established. For the first time in decades, everything was transparent. Everything was honest. Everything was clean. And that mattered more than the money itself. Later that year, Grandpa Henry celebrated his 83rd birthday. Unlike previous gatherings, this one felt different, lighter, healthier. People laughed again. Not forced laughter, real laughter. Family members spoke openly. Old wounds slowly began healing. Even Sophia looked happier. She spent months rebuilding trust after her role in the bracelet scheme. It wasn't easy, but she worked hard. And eventually people saw the difference. One mistake doesn't define a person's entire life. What matters is what happens after the mistake. Whether someone learns, whether they grow, whether they change. Sophia did. And for that, I respected her. Near the end of the party, Grandpa Henry pulled me aside. His eyes twinkled with the same wisdom that had helped expose the truth months earlier. You know, he said, smiling gently, most people think this story is about money. I laughed softly. It certainly started that way. He shook his head. No. Then he pointed toward Ethan. My husband stood across the yard laughing with relatives. Happy, relaxed, free. For years, that family lived under secrets. Grandpa Henry said. The money was never the real problem. What was? He smiled. The lies? I looked around the yard, and suddenly I understood. Every terrible thing that happened could be traced back to one choice. A lie. Then another. Then another. Until the lies became larger than the people telling them, and eventually they crushed everything beneath them. Everything except the truth. Because no matter how deeply truth is buried, it has a way of finding daylight. That night, Ethan and I returned home. The stars filled the sky. The world felt peaceful. As we walked toward the front door, Ethan suddenly stopped. What are you thinking about? I smiled. The wedding. He laughed. Of all things. Yeah. I remembered the day Floryn whispered her warning. The day she promised I would never replace her. The day she started a war she believed she could win. I thought about everything that followed. The missing money, the fake bracelet, the investigation, the hidden documents, the family secrets, the betrayal, the justice, the healing. Then I looked at my husband, the man who stood beside me through all of it, and I realized something important. Floryn spent years trying to destroy my marriage. Yet in the end, her actions only made it stronger. Because truth had tested us, and we survived together. Ethan wrapped his arm around my shoulder. We walked inside, closed the door, and left the past where it belonged, behind us. Because sometimes revenge isn't destroying the person who hurt you. Sometimes the greatest revenge is building a happy life they failed to take away. And as I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, one final thought crossed my mind. The woman who tried to bury me beneath her lies never realized one thing. The truth grows stronger underground, and sooner or later, it always rises.